Beneath our cities and above our streets lie the bones of another age. Rusting viaducts, sealed tunnels, and stations where no train has stopped in decades. Welcome to the world of abandoned railways and ghost stations. Every great city was built on rail. Through the 19th and 20th centuries, dense networks of track carried the coal, the freight, and the workers that powered the industrial age. But when industry moved on and the car took over, much of that infrastructure was simply left behind. Planners even have a name for these forgotten in-between spaces: terrain vague, the vague terrain, neither fully city nor fully wild, where the industrial past slowly turns green again. Lines die for all kinds of reasons. A faster route opens nearby. Freight shifts to trucks and highways. A war interrupts, and the money never returns. Sometimes a station simply ends up in the wrong place, too close to its neighbor, or built for trains that no longer fit. But they all share a single arc, from vital to redundant to abandoned. And what happens next reveals almost everything about the city around them. Our first stop, New York. In 1934, the city lifted its freight trains 30 feet into the air. The elevated West Side Line let locomotives roll directly into the factories and warehouses of Chelsea and the meatpacking district, ending decades of deadly collisions on the streets below. For a while, it was the beating industrial artery of Manhattan's West Side. But the age of rail was already ending. Trucking took the freight, factories moved out, and the viaduct slowly starved. The very last train crawled across it in 1980, pulling, of all things, a load of frozen turkeys. Then, for nearly 20 years, nothing. The tracks disappeared beneath self-seeded grasses and wildflowers, a secret meadow, 30 feet above the traffic. In 1999, two neighbors, Joshua David and Robert Hammond, founded the Friends of the High Line to save it from demolition. Working with landscape architects and the plantsman Pete Adolph, they transformed the derelict viaduct into one of the most celebrated parks on Earth, weaving the old rails right into the new gardens. From its opening in 2009, it drew millions of visitors. A dead railway had become a destination. But there was a cost. Homes beside the new park jumped in value by more than 35%. That wealth swept into a neighborhood long shaped by redlining and lower incomes, pushing longtime residents out. The High Line had solved one problem and created another, a beautiful public space that became an engine of displacement. Planners call it eco-gentrification. Cross the Atlantic to Paris, and you find a very different afterlife. The Petite Cincha, the Little Belt, was a 32-kilometer railway looped right around the old city, begun in 1852 under Napoleon III to feed the fortifications and link the great terminal stations. At the World's Fair of 1900, it carried as many as 90,000 passengers a day. Then, in that very same year, the Paris Metro opened, faster and running right under people's feet. Ridership on the Little Belt collapsed. Passenger service ended in 1934, and the last freight rolled away in 1993. 23 kilometers of stone trench were left to fall silent, slicing unseen through the apartment blocks of Paris. But cut off from the streets, the trench did something remarkable. It came alive. Hundreds of wild species colonized the abandoned ballast, turning the loop into a green corridor threading through the heart of the city. And where New York built one polished, unified park, Paris chose the opposite, scattered, local, and deliberately wild. Not a commodity to be sold, but an ecological commons to be shared. Not every ruin is out in the open. Beneath London and New York lies a hidden layer of the network. Ghost stations, sealed platforms that trains still rush past in the dark. These weren't killed by decline. They were built by rival private companies, packed too close together, and made redundant the moment those competing lines were finally combined. In London, Down Street sat in wealthy Mayfair, where residents preferred their cars. It closed in 1932. Aldwych, stranded on a lonely spur, never found the crowds, and shut in 1994 rather than pay to replace its 1907 wooden lifts. But in the Blitz, these dead stations found a second life. Aldwych became a bomb-proof vault for the British Museum's treasures, even the Elgin marbles. And down street hid Winston Churchill's War Cabinet, deep underground. In New York, the most beautiful ghost of all is City Hall. Opened in 1904 as the showpiece of the subway, it dazzled with Guastavino-tiled arches, brass chandeliers, and glass skylights. But its platform was built on a tight curve. And when the city moved to longer, tin-car trains, the gap between the doors and that curved edge grew dangerous. In 1945, the jewel of the system was simply closed. Yet these voids were never truly dead. Today, London's ghost stations earn their keep as film sets, renting for thousands of pounds an hour, and as sell-out heritage tours. And that beautiful curved platform in New York still hosts the number 6 train, as it loops around to turn back toward uptown. The ruins had found a new economy, nostalgia. But the strangest ghost of all never carried a single passenger. In Cincinnati, planners set out to solve a traffic crisis by building a rapid transit loop, laid, ingeniously, into the drained bed of an abandoned canal that cut right through the city. Between 1920 and 1923, crews dug 2 miles of tunnel and 3 stations beneath a brand-new boulevard, Central Parkway. And then it stopped. The First World War had delayed the start, and post-war inflation nearly doubled the price of steel and concrete. By 1927, the $6 million budget was gone, spent before a single rail was laid. In 1928, with the automobile ascendant and reformers in City Hall, the whole project was quietly canceled. The tunnels were finished. The trains never came. Above ground, the graded route was later paved into Interstate 75, locking Cincinnati into the age of the car. But below, the empty tunnels never disappeared, because sealing them would cost more than simply keeping them. So the city still maintains its ghost subway, now carrying a giant water main and fiber optic cables. A transit failure, quietly repurposed into vital infrastructure. Step back, and a single pattern emerges across all 4. Everyone began as an industrial or military conduit. Each was overtaken by the automobile, decommissioned, and left as an urban void. And then, at the very end, each faced the same fork in the road, the choice of what a dead railway should become. The same bones, for different fates. New York's viaduct became a manicured linear park and a magnet for wealth. Paris's loop became a wild, decentralized commons. London's platforms became heritage and film sets. And Cincinnati's tunnels became a utility corridor, carrying water instead of people. The same problem, 4 answers, each shaped by a different idea of what a city is for. Because in the end, the fate of an abandoned railway is never really an engineering question. It's a political and economic choice between the space as a commodity to be sold and the space as a commons to be shared. Every rusting viaduct and every sealed platform is a decision, waiting to be made, about who the city truly belongs to. So the next time you pass an overgrown embankment or feel a train slow through a dark and empty station, look closer. That silence isn't the end of a story. It's the space between chapters. The rails may be abandoned, but the city is still deciding what they mean. If you enjoyed this journey through the Forgotten Network, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next line.